This is Easter Island. This is the Moai, these giant stone heads. But here's what you don't know about them. They hold the key to one of the greatest mysteries of our time. The mystery of who put them there and how they got them there. You see, over 700 years ago, the people of Rapa Nui carved more than 800 moai from the island's red scoria. Then just as mysteriously as they appeared, the civilization collapsed. They abandoned the island and left behind these gigantic stone heads, and the secrets of how they made them. And now, almost a century after that mystery first captivated scientists, we think we finally have the answer. For many years, experts believe the moai were created with incredibly advanced technology, possibly even alien technology. Now, thanks to a recent discovery, we can reveal the truth behind these magnificent statues. Join us as we delve into the enigma of Easter Island's moai and uncover the surprising secrets of their creation. One day on Easter Island in 1978, Paul Ban was on an archaeological expedition to find out how the moai were made. He wanted to uncover how the ancient islanders transported such heavy stones across the island. You see, archaeologists had already figured out how the statues were carved. First, they would dig a shallow pit for the body of the statue, then build up a mound of dirt around it. This would form a mold for the shape of the torso. Then they chipped away the excess rock to create the final shape. Finally, they placed the finished statue in the pit and covered it with a layer of dirt. So it was clear that making the statues themselves wasn't the hard part. It was getting them upright. After careful investigation, Paul came up with an ingenious solution. Using ropes and rollers, the ancient islanders managed to move the giant statues from the quarry to the ceremonial platform called the ahu. Now, if you're wondering why they didn't just use wheels, it's because back then wheels weren't invented yet. Anyway, the theory sounded plausible, but it couldn't explain how they set up the first statue. You see, to get the ropes tight enough to roll the statue over long distances, they needed a starting ramp. And that meant someone had to push the statue upright, which was no easy task. So Paul concluded that the islanders must have somehow used levers to raise the statues. But he couldn't quite figure out how they did it. Years passed, and the mystery of the moai remained unsolved. However, the true story of their creation has recently come to light. It all started when a new team of researchers revisited Easter Island to conduct their own tests. And what they discovered was shocking. Using scientific instruments, they found out that the islanders hadn't carved all the statues in the same way. In fact, the older statues were made with a different technique. It turned out that the earliest statues were much more massive, weighing up to 14 tons, while the later ones were much lighter. And it wasn't just the statues that changed. The islanders also changed their approach to carving. At first, they cut the statues from solid rock. But then around 1400, they switched to building them with stacked rocks. This technique was easier and faster, allowing them to finish more statues in less time. But it also had its drawbacks, since the stacked rocks were looser. They had to carve the faces and torsos separately and then transport them to the platforms. That meant they needed to find a better way to move the statues. That's where the ramp comes in. Researchers believe that the islanders built the ramp to move the statues. But unlike Paul's theory, they had a genius idea to make the ramp itself. They used a fallen tree as the base and then carved the top into a smooth slope. This made it easier to slide the statues onto the rollers. Once on the platform, they removed the ramp and the statue was in place. And you thought building your own ramp was impressive. Wait till you hear what Zora did. It turns out that some statues were so large that the islanders had to build special ramps just for them. In other words, they built ramps to build ramps. They rolled the statue onto the first ramp and then used a crane to lift it onto the second ramp. From there, it was a straightforward process of sliding the statue off the ramp and onto the platform. However, they didn't stop there. The geniuses of Rapa Nui went even further. Some statues required extra support, so they reinforced the ramps with wooden pillars. These pillars also served as a protective barrier ensuring that the statue wouldn't fall off the ramp during transportation. With this innovative engineering feat, they were able to move the giant statues safely and efficiently, completing their construction on the Ahu platforms. But there's still one big question. How did they actually carve the statues? We already know that they used stone tools made of harder rocks like basalt. But how did they cut through the tough red scoria? Well, it turns out they had a secret weapon. Every day the islanders would chip away at the statues, but they weren't just hacking at random. They were using a technique called hot stone napping. Basically, they would heat a rock until it was almost red hot and then dip it into water. The rapid cooling made the rock brittle, so it shattered into small pieces. They used those sharp pieces to create flakes and gradually shape the statue. But how did they heat the rocks? They probably used fire pits filled with volcanic rocks. To keep the stone cool enough to chip, they had to transfer the heat slowly. They would throw green branches into the fire pit to produce more smoke, which helped conduct heat away from the stone. Plus, the smoke acted as a lubricant, keeping the stone from sticking to the hammerstone. With this ingenious method, they were able to shape the toughest rocks into intricate works of art. The more we learn about the Rapa Nui, the more impressed we become. They were masters of adapting to their environment and turning any obstacle into an opportunity. Even their downfall was caused by their resourcefulness. But don't worry, we'll tell you all about that next time. Stay tuned for more updates on the fascinating history of Easter Island.